Welcome back, Honors. All right. So, I don't know. I haven't had you guys yet, but I'm pretty confident we're going to cover like a ton of stuff today. All right, about the ancient Persians. The Persians are a very, like I've been talking about in class, just like a misunderstood ancient empire, right? A lot of people gives a lot of different credit to a lot of different other people, but I think they're one of the ones that we need to talk about more than any, just because they kind of draw the line in the sand and create a separation between the East and the West in their failed invasions of Greece, right? And so for us to understand their place in history, because they come up multiple times, we need to be able to talk about them a little bit, right? And some of you are like, well, the Hittites come up a couple times. Calm down, all right? So I don't like talking about them because they're kind of like a little flare-up, right? They don't like exist for a long time. The Assyrians were super important because they caused like the diaspora and the movement of other people and things like that. But in class today, we talked about Cyrus the Great, okay? We talked about tolerance and his ideas. We talked about the city of Persepolis, their capital. And then we started talking about a couple other different things, right? The big stuff we're getting into now is their religion and a couple of their other major leaders, all right? So now, first and foremost, though, this is their religion, right? Zoroastrianism, right? Zoroastrianism, ironically enough, is still, not even really ironically enough, surprisingly enough, coincidentally enough, is still a practiced faith today, like, right? So, for example, Freddie Mercury, lead singer of Queen, right, was actually cremated by his parents because they are Zoroasters as well. They were of the Zoroastrian faith, and they believed that when you died, giving into tradition, you're supposed to always be cremated, right? So Zoroastrians were a very, very prominent Persian faith. This is the development of their monotheistic faith. And it has major impacts all over history today, right? So it's got all kinds of different impacts when it comes to other monotheistic religions. It's got impacts on Christianity. It's got impacts on the second versions of Judaism. It's got impacts on the Nation of Islam, right? It's got impacts everywhere. But they actually created like a very interesting dynamic. Like, for example, their main chief god, this right here, that is Zoroaster. Zoroaster is the prophet of Zoroastrianism, right? We believe is a real person. We don't really know where he is in time. He could be as far back as the 10th century BC. He could be as far forward as the 6th. We're not really sure. All right, so now, but he did prophesize a couple of things. He said, like, for example, the big chief god, the one true God in their faith, is called Ahura Mazda. All right, so now, not as in the car company, but as in their God. And then they also had like a duality perspective as well. They're the only other faith that has ever really existed in history that did have a place of a evil force figure and a bad place you would go to following judgment, right? Most of the other faiths, with the exception of Christianity and the rise of Christianity, they don't have what you would call a hell, right? Like, so, whereas the Zoroastrians did, they did have a place of punishment, right? So, for example, their bad god or their bad force that can like take you over is called Ahriman, all right? So, in Ahriman, it's like anything you do that steps outside of the values that Ahura Mazda is supposed to teach, right? So, and good went to heaven or a place of paradise, and the bad went to a place of punishment, right? So it's still practiced today, and it actually is believed to influence, like I said, a lot of different ideals. Like, a lot of people believe, a lot of historians believe that it had early impacts on Christianity, right? This concept of a place of punishment and this concept of a figure of evil, right? So, and because we do know that, of course, like Christ and bringing like his ideas and also the prophecies of Abraham as well as everything else led into our religious modalities. But if any humans along the way have had any effect on our faith and tried like kind of like tinkered with it a little bit, a big part of it is a lot of historians believe that maybe that actually was influenced by the Zoroastrian faith a little bit because it was so prominently big in the Persian culture. So, and then we got to talk about like how did Cyrus and Darius keep control of such a large empire? Now, I haven't got to Darius yet, I don't believe. Oh, wait. No. Yeah, all right, cool. So, Darius is going to be the guy that follows Cyrus in the leading of Persia, right? Now, what the big thing we need to talk is, why did I just put ... How did Cyrus and Darius get control of such a vast empire, right? The way they're going to do this is actually pretty ingenious, all right? So the reason why the Persians were able to stay dominant for just so long is because they had a very... Okay, that's fine. They had a very specific system when it came to organizing their empire, right? They learned from the Egyptians and Djoser under the nome system. They learned from the Egyptians and the bureaucratic system. They learned from the Mesopotamian kingdoms when it came to law enforcement. They learned from the Assyrians when it came to military enforcement. They learned from everyone and took the best concepts of every single place and then mushed them all into one new political system to create a unified empire where the people were happy even though they were conquered, right? So here's the thing. They broke them down into provinces. Much like the nome system established by Djoser, they're going to split them all up. And in each of those, they're going to appoint a royal governor, all right? Also known as a satrap. Not to be confused with sappers, the people in the Assyrian army that would dig underneath walls, right? So now, they were loyal to the emperor and did his bidding regardless of what anyone else said, right? So no matter what, if Cyrus said to the governors, you need to enforce this new tax, or if Darius said, you need to enforce this new law, the governors without hesitation enforced that. And if at any point some of the emperors thought that the governor was trying to curry favor and maybe lead a revolt, this person could be assassinated, right? Or could be executed at the will of the emperor, right? So now, or the king, whatever you want to call him, right? But it's a Persian empire, so we would call them an emperor, right? So this right here is actually an engraving of a satrap receiving tax money and favors from people of a conquered territory. This is the satrap right there, who's actually being blocked by a palm leaf, right? And actually sitting in a royal seat, right, in a province. So satraps were a very big thing. Also, they employed these people, which was genius. To keep an eye on citizens as well as spy on their own leadership, they had a spy network. They had a network of royal spies that did everything to make sure that no one was going to steal any power away from the leaders or lead a revolt, right? Which is absolutely genius. They had spies planted in every single province that would report back to the emperor and let them know if anything was going awry, which is genius too, because you got to have a backup system, right? You got to know if somebody's up to some stuff. All right, so getting after it though, the royal road is another amazing thing as well. So here's the thing. So you've got now a bureaucratic system and a deconcentration system when it comes to trying to establish different provincial governments within your overall government, a bureaucratic system, much like in Egypt, right? You've got that. You've got your spy network to make sure that everybody's doing what they're supposed to be doing. The third element, the big key element to trying to keep Persia united and wealthy, which is a huge thing, the royal road, all right? Some of you are like, is this like the Silk Road? Shannon, I love your enthusiasm, all right? So, and Yimei, I heard you too. And then, but it is kind of like the Silk Road a little bit, but it's the first version of it, all right? So the great thing about any empire, no empire has a golden age or flourishes if they're not making a bunch of money, right? So if they're not economically super stable. So the thing about it is the royal road was 1,677 miles long and had 111 relay stations. And it cut through the entire Persian Empire to bring new products and goods to all the different provinces, right? Other smaller roads would branch off the royal road, but this is just like, if you want to write something up here, it's a giant trade route, right? It's a huge trade route. It's like a highway almost. It had relay stations. It had exits off the royal road. It had smaller roads that branched off of it. In these relay stations had rest areas where they could get fresh horses and then continue upon their journey. It's like when you're on a family vacation, you're like, I gotta go to the bathroom, and then they're like, oh, I gotta wait till the next rest stop. It's a very ingenious thing for an ancient empire. And the entire royal road could be traveled in about a week by a horseman if they did it the right way, right? So caravans, it took about a month, all right? So which is a very, very long period of time. Now, but if you're talking about being on a horse for a week and traveling almost consistently, and then because a lot of you are like, well, that horse is going to be tired. Like I said, you could trade your horse in to keep going. That's insane. That also creates an information network as well. The network for reporting back to the leaders to let them know in Persepolis what's going on in all the different provinces. The royal road was huge. It actually cuts right through there, through Anatolia, and then also through the Zagros Mountains at the base of them, and it can span almost the entire Fertile Crescent area, which is ingenious, right? Absolutely ingenious. So now this is another look at it as well, and you can see Persepolis is over here, and then it actually connects to everything, and eventually the Silk Road later on would connect inside of it, and then it would actually travel the rest of the way up to Europe, which is insane. That is the royal road though. So anyway, continuing forward, then you've got the next big leader. So the big things we're going to talk about over the next little bit of time, and I'm not going to try and chew up your entire evening, but we're going to talk about Darius the First, we're going to talk about his son, and then we're going to talk about the guy that eventually takes over the Persian Empire, right? Because like we said before, if we go back to our Can I go back to the home? No, is that not a thing? All right. So, but if you look at let's jump back. So if you look at the entire Persian Empire, all of this brown right here, that is the entire Persian Empire. It was enormous. So it's going to be a little hard to take down, right? We got to talk about the guy that actually took it down, and it kind of led to the destruction of a lot of their intelligence, which is sad, even though we hold this man up to be idealistic in a lot of ways. But the big guy that's going to take over after Cyrus the Great is actually Darius the First. All right, so now Darius the First. Now Darius, of course, is a majorly impactful person in history. We still have Darius is still a common name. Darius Rucker actually is the only country singer I'll listen to. But the big thing about Darius is actually, I know one of you has a historian father or mother that's like, Mr. Terry, Darius did not immediately come after Cyrus the Great. Cambyses came after Cyrus the Great, which is Cyrus the Great's son. Okay, but this is true, but I need you to calm down a little bit over there, Brittany. But the big thing is, Darius actually had a larger reign. Cambyses really only added Egypt a little bit, right? He didn't do a whole lot, and he ends up dead, all right? And we're not even really sure how he died for sure. Some people say that he stabbed himself in the thigh on accident. Some people say someone else stabbed him in the thigh. But we do know that Darius takes over after him. But Darius had a much better leadership role and ruled for a lot longer than anybody. So we always usually, when we're looking at the reign of the Achaemenid Empire, we go Cyrus the Great, Darius the First, right? But Darius the First is a crazy origin story too. Darius is actually one of the bodyguards of Cyrus's son, right? So Cambyses, all right? So he is a member of the king's bodyguard, and he overthrows the king in 522 BC. Now, some of you are like, wait a minute, I thought you said he was a bodyguard. He didn't overthrow Cyrus's actual son. So the story goes, the legend goes, that Cyrus's son, Cambyses, ended up ruling for a time, and then he ends up dying, right? We don't really know if he was assassinated or if it was an accident, but we just know that he died, right? But then another guy takes over, Cambyses' brother, all right? And Darius, being Cambyses' bodyguard, looks over at his brother and is like, wait a minute, that's not his actual brother. And apparently it was an imposter, somebody that had killed the real brother to try and become king himself and dressed up like him, right? And so Darius, being a noble bodyguard, a king's bodyguard, he takes out his sword, goes up in the front of everyone, stabs the imposter to death, and standing over his body, takes control of all of Persia, marries Cyrus's daughter, and then whack, becomes king of Persia. He wasn't even in line to do it, but he just took over power because apparently he was such a noble leader, right? But apparently he takes power and creates a very well-organized and super efficient government. Now, he brought peace and stability as well, and then he also expanded the empire by about 500 square miles, which is a huge amount of territory, right? Unfortunately, though, he could never conquer Greece. The Greeks are really, really pesky, very, very hard to take over, right? Mainly because you don't want to fight on their territory, right? You don't want to fight a Greek in Greece. You want to fight a Greek in Egypt, right? Apparently the Greeks, one of their only major embarrassing defeats was in Egypt, actually. The Athenians were defeated by the Egyptians themselves. They also, though, Darius is going to then create a money-based economy. This is another huge thing as well. You just put cash next to it. So before Darius, everyone bartered. It would be like, all right, I'll have this, and I'll give you that, and then we'll trade. All right, so not everybody. Sub-Saharan Africans, they had a money system, but nobody even knew they were there. But Darius, under Darius's rule, they took over this little Greek territory, right? This little tiny Greek territory that some of y'all were like, I thought you said he never took over the Greeks. I'm not talking about all of Greece. I'm just talking about one little city. He takes it over, and this one little city had actually developed this thing called currency, right? And on their currency, there were little turtles on the back of it, right? And they were like, what is this stuff? And they were like, oh, we use this to buy things, right? It symbolizes our labor, all right? So it symbolizes that we make a certain amount or we worked a certain amount, and so we can weigh it, and then it's all universal, and they're like, okay, we get it, all right? And then basically they took this idea from them and then spread through the royal road this concept of currency under the leadership of Darius the First, right? Darius the Great. So he's a majorly important figure, and the main things you need to know is the money-based economy and that he could never actually take over the Greeks. He tried to take over them twice, and then it failed. And then this is his son, all right? A lot of y'all are looking at this name, and you're like, say it with me now. Xerxes, all right? Xerxes the First. Now, according to Hollywood, they want you to believe that Xerxes looked like this. This is a picture from the movie 300 with Gerard Butler, which is a terribly historically inaccurate movie. And I know a couple of y'all are like, this is Sparta. All right, calm down. All right, so this is true. It is Sparta. Thank you, Amy. But this apparently is not what Xerxes looked like. Xerxes actually looked like this, which is a very, very drastically different image, if you ask me. We got this guy, and we got this guy, right? That's what Xerxes actually looked like. However, there is one thing the film did get right. He is the son of Darius the Great. He did bring Persia kind of to, like, its height-ish, right? Like, so, but leaders that followed him would be weak and cause the disunity among the empire. Also, jot this down, he's friggin' nuts, all right? Like, so he is crazy. Like, some of y'all are like, well, he couldn't have been that crazy. Okay, so first of all, correct this. He's best known for his invasion of Greece during the Second Persian invasion, all right? Second Persian invasion. Don't put Third Persian War. They're not really wars at all. All right, so put Second Persian invasion. But Xerxes is kind of mental, all right? So Darius the Great and Cyrus the Great believed that they were men leaders for their god, right, for their religion. Xerxes flips it on its head and begins to try and rule like a dictator, right? So he tries to rule like a person who believes that he's completely in charge of the military. He also believed that he was a god, all right, like a god man himself, right? For example, he wanted to be able to walk upon water and then go across into Greece by foot. So he actually had these two giant bridges built on the backs of boats, right? So he actually wasted a large group of boats from his own navy to build bridges so he could walk over there. And on the first attempt to build these bridges, the river or the bay or the whatever, the large body of water flooded and destroyed one of the bridges, and he commanded a bunch of his military. He was like, every one of you grab a whip and punish that river. And they're standing there like, huh? And he was like, yeah, go into the water and whip it. And so a bunch of men went into the water at Hellensport and whipped it 300 times. Like, stop that river. All right, so like that, like this guy's kind of nuts, all right? So, and he actually ends up losing an embarrassing defeat at the Second Persian invasion, and the empire after him kind of just begins to crumble, right? So, but Xerxes, nut job, all right? So anyway, but then you have Alexander the Great. Some of you are like, Alexander's Greek, he's not Persian. Well, here's the thing. He is a Macedonian, a Greek king, and he lays the final death blow to the Persian Empire, right? After Cyrus and Darius, and Cambyses a little bit, grew this empire to be so amazing, Xerxes kind of tips it over and sends it into despair, right? And every leader that followed after him, there was a lot of generals that began fighting each other, governors of provinces began leading rebellions, right? And the Persian Empire just begins to crumble, right? So, and during its crumble, the guy that lays the final death blow is your man Alexander the Great, right? So Alexander is the guy that just destroys it. And first of all, where is Greece? Greece is right here, all right? Y'all know where Greece is already. And in November of 333, Alexander the Greek and his, well, yeah, that works. Alexander the Great and his trusted general Parmenion defeat the Persian king Darius the Third, which is nowhere near Darius the First, at Cotomanus and on an uneven coastal plain south of Issus, all right? All you need to say is in 333, Alexander the Great conquers Persia, all right? So, like, he conquered the entire known world, and he creates the, whoa, what's going on? He creates the Hellenistic Empire, and the empire of Alexander then began to include Persia itself, right? So Persia, even though it was amazing and had so many great things and did so many amazing things, and they're kind of a very underrated empire and used in Hollywood as a lot of villains, they did do a crazy amount of stuff, grow, prosper, and kind of directly impacted a lot of our Western historian or Western civilization lifestyles today. And so we're going to leave off here. I hope you guys have a great evening. Have a good one. See you tomorrow.